Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to join your subcommittee today. Let me start with Dr. Romine. I chair the Appropriations Subcommittee for the Department of Commerce that includes NIST, as you know. I'm interested in ensuring that you have the necessary resources. The administration's budget is a $112 million reduction, less than enacted over last year's FY19 levels. Would you expect this budget cut to impact NIST's specific role in supporting its public and private partnership on IoT cybersecurity research and standard settings?
The guidance that we received from the administration during the development of the budget was to ensure that we protected to the largest extent possible certain programs that they viewed as high priorities, and that included the cybersecurity program at NIST. And so we believe we can execute the necessary activities under our cybersecurity program under the President's proposed budget.
I hope that's the case, and we'll be watching to make certain that remains the case, that what you just testified remains true. Really a question for all. The subcommittee I chair in Commerce, we held a hearing last year on the private industry's use of coordinated vulnerability disclosure programs, including bug bounty programs to identify cyber threats. Many businesses and federal agencies have found utility in this approach as the diversity, scale, and expertise of cybersecurity research community can oftentimes identify vulnerabilities that automated scanners and permanent penetration teams cannot. Are there examples of connected device manufacturers utilizing this type of cybersecurity threat detection? And if not, do you think it's a feasible tool? Mr. Bergman? You looked anxious.
Thank you for the thank you for the question, Senator. Absolutely. What we're seeing is that a number of the more mature manufacturers are not only using these techniques, but they are growing beyond the basics. There's a metric out there called BSIM, Building Security and Maturity Model, that we're fond of. And this program includes major manufacturers like Qualcomm, Intel, other brand names that you would know from the manufacturing and from the consumer technology industry, as well as names from other consumer categories, the financial industry, and so on. So it's really across the board. And what they have is multiple levels, and what you just described is what I would call level 1. And there are companies that are working at level 2 and level 3, where level 3 is they're using the intelligence that they get from the coordinated vulnerability information in order to predict the next threat before it is even detected. So there's quite a bit of work going on in that area, and it's been very successful.
Thank you. Others? Mr. Geiger?
Yes, so I would agree with Mr. Bergman that there are a lot of mature manufacturers that currently have vulnerability disclosure policies and procedures. It is not something that we necessarily see ecosystem-wide, and we think that's a problem. We think that it is very important for IoT manufacturers to have an ability to receive disclosures about vulnerabilities in their products from independent researchers. This will help them to protect consumers by issuing a patch or other mitigation. We also think that this is something that government agencies, government-wide, ought to employ. But there is a very important distinction between coordinated vulnerability disclosure and bug bounties. The distinction is that for bug bounties, it's usually limited in scope and time duration, and the researchers are paid for that work. So it tends to be a large volume of disclosures, and it only applies to a certain subset. Even if you have a bug bounty program, you should have a baseline coordinated vulnerability disclosure program that applies. It's just a process for receiving the information. It doesn't necessarily mean that the researcher will get a reward, but it means that there will be a response and some sort of mitigation once the disclosure has been submitted.
Thanks for that explanation.
Senator, if I may, just to add on to that, we've worked closely with this committee and the Senate Homeland Committee at least a couple years ago on something called the Patch Act. And one of the things that's, I think, relevant to here and the coordinated vulnerability disclosure issue is when there are vulnerabilities discovered, vendors want those vulnerabilities reported to the vendor so they have time to create a fix and push it out. I know that this committee and others are looking at legislation that would leverage a CVD-like program. On balance, we think that those are good. The role of government in identifying and mitigating those vulnerabilities, I think, is something that we're still looking at, trying to understand better, and what flows from that. But on balance, one of the capabilities with the baseline is managing those vulnerabilities, patching, and so forth, which I think is one of the fundamental things that we've seen with bills. And they've departed, but I was just going to mention that with Senator Cantwell, Senator Blumenthal, a number of things that they raised as concerns, I think the core baseline will address those and likely more.
Thank you.